The size of the clubs are very different. So Ostersunds was a club in Sweden where it was quite a small club. It had a very small operation, very small team. So, and the departments are very small. So the main focus on Ostersunds was the recruitment of the players from nationally and globally, and also working very closely with a manager and then managing some departments like sports science, medical academy, but on a very, very small level. And then Huddersfield bought me out of my contract, so they paid money for me to go to start early because they was just relegated from the Premier League. So they had a big transition. So coming down from the Premier League into the Championship it has all sorts of challenges. So the team hadn't won. So my first position was to appoint a new manager, and then was to look at the departments, which were all a lot bigger than Ostersunds. So it's a lot bigger club. So in each department, maybe in Ostersunds where you have one or two, and in Huddersfield, in each department you had 5 or 6. So you'd look after about 8, 9, 10 departments across that. So the challenges were very different, and the transfer window in January was very different because we had to build something for the club for the future. So we had to maybe change players. So players that didn't want to play for the club anymore could go to other clubs. And we had to bring new young players in that would help us what we needed to achieve going forward.
The VAR Show. The one place for your weekly football update.
So hello, very warm welcome to the VAR Show, the show which talks about all the various major football leagues in detail. Today we are going to continue the theme of interviews, and we have Mr. David Webb with us, who has been the former technical director of Ostersunds and also the head of football operations at Huddersfield Town, among holding a host of various capacities in other clubs. So without wasting much time, I would like to first thank David for coming on the show. Thank you and welcome to the show. And I would like to begin by asking you, how are you and what are you doing these days?
Yeah, I'm very good, thank you. So contract finished at Huddersfield 2 months ago. So now just taking some time to consider some options.
Of course, and I wanted to ask you, you have been you had been with Huddersfield Town for a while now. So how was the pandemic period? Being along with the club, looking after almost a certain aspect which kind of didn't happen. Like football didn't happen for quite a while, and that was, I think, after a long time, maybe almost around a century later, that such a phase everyone was going through. How was it?
Yeah, it was difficult. You mean at the start of the pandemic?
Yeah,
it was very different for football over here because there was no crowds in the games. For the first 2-3 months between March and sort of June, it was all shut down. And then when the players come back, you had to do it in small groups, and then bigger groups, and then bigger groups, and then you had to build it back slowly. So, yeah, it was a bit surreal. It wasn't natural or normal, but slowly but surely it started to come back, and then it progressed to games. And now there's a proper Premier League, and all the other leagues are running sort of as normal, but the only difference is there's no fans.
Of course, and it would have been difficult for everyone, all the teams and even the players and even general public all over the world. What is the most difficult thing that you faced, during this pandemic as a head of, football operations?
Yeah, I think you miss the daily contact with the staff and with the players. It's you have to work remotely, so that was very difficult to do because you're not you don't have all the contacts, you can't make the decisions, you're not at the training ground, the games are not operational, so it was completely different. So you had to have a lot of meetings over Zoom, over Skype, and make sure the players had all their programs, that the staff was still doing all the things they needed to do, and then you had to lead the operation from remotely. So yeah, it was a challenge.
Definitely. And I wanted to ask, continuing the same theme, that you were head of football operations and before that the technical director of Ostersunds. are those just two different words, or what is the biggest
Yeah.
difference between those two positions that you held?
The size of the clubs are very different. So Ostersunds was a club in Sweden where it was quite a small club. It had a very small operation, very small team. So and the departments were very small. So the main focus on Ostersunds was the recruitment of the players from nationally and globally, and also working very closely with a manager, and then managing some departments like sports science, medical academy, but on a very, very small level. And then Huddersfield bought me out of my contract, so they paid money for me to go to start early because they was just relegated from the Premier League. So they had a big transition. So coming down from the Premier League into the Championship it has all sorts of challenges. So the team hadn't won. So my first position was to appoint a new manager, and then was to look at the departments, which were all a lot bigger than Ostersunds. So it's a lot bigger club. So in each department, maybe in Ostersunds where you had one or two, and in Huddersfield, in each department you had 5 or 6. So you'd look after about 8, 9, 10 departments across that. So the challenges were very different, and the transfer window in January was very different because we had to build something for the club for the future. So we had to maybe change players. So players that didn't want to play for the club anymore could go to other clubs. Then we had to bring new young players in that would help us what we needed to achieve going forward.
Of course, and like you said, like you joined as Huddersfield Town when they were just relegated, and you expect like most of the teams that fall back to immediately go back up. But like you said, like many players wanted to leave, and you have to like get new targets early and maybe get them hit the ground running. How difficult is it, like the transition between both?
Yeah, it's very difficult because you have two options. You can either try and spend your way back up. So that means you still already have a very good group of players, and if you keep the strength of your squad, you have a good chance to compete. And then you maybe want to add to that with stronger players. Or in Huddersfield's case, they had a 3-year plan. So year 1 was to try and do the best they can, but no real ambitions to go back up, because they wanted to do things the right way, because financially it has a big impact when you come down. So you have players on big salaries, staff on big salaries, so it takes some time to turn over. So Huddersfield wanted to do it the right way, bring some younger players through, players that wanted to come for the club. So it's a 3-year plan, and within those 3 years is to try and get back to the Premier League, and to do it in a way that using their philosophy and methodology.
Of course, I'll get back to Ostersunds, and Ostersunds has had a lot of English influence. Like you have the managers, like you have Ian, and then you had Graham before that. Why is this, like in yourself, why is there so much English influence over there?
Yeah, I think Scandinavia is a very easy country for English people to adapt, because it's they all speak English very well, and the owner had a really good relationship with Graham initially, and they built this philosophy for the club. And then Ian had the same philosophy of working, and then I came in to work alongside, and the idea was to try and get top hungry young players that had maybe been at big clubs when they were 16, 17, hadn't made it, but then you give them a second chance to play because they're still very talented. And that was a philosophy, and I think you had to buy into that philosophy, and Ian and Graham did, and myself did. So it was kind of a good fit at that time.
Of course, and like before you got into maybe this technical director job, you started your footballing career with maybe scouting and like player recruitment in earlier. So you worked with teams who are like known to be involved in unearthing talents like Southampton, maybe Crystal Palace, or even Bournemouth. How do you scout so well, like as in general?
What's my secret?
Yeah.
I can't tell my secret. No, I think it's just a combination of things. It's you have to look at obviously the talent. I think the first thing you have to understand is the club you're recruiting into. So each of the clubs you mentioned, there's Southampton, Bournemouth, Tottenham, they're all very different. So, and Huddersfield as well. So each time you recruit, you're recruiting a different type of player to suit the style of the manager, the club, etc. So I think as a recruiter, as a scout, you have to understand that my philosophy myself might like the way Barcelona play, but that type of player is not going to fit in with maybe a Bournemouth or maybe a Huddersfield. So you have to understand what the club's about. That's your first challenge. Always understand what the club needs, what type of players they need, what type does a manager play. And then you have to look at, and then usually you can build within that, like once you understand the talent, then you have to understand the data that comes alongside that. So how do you use the data for your club? How do you measure it against other players that you can buy, other players that you think are achievable, what other competitors are doing? Then you have to look at the character side of what type of characters are coming into your club. So, for example, Bournemouth, we tried to identify players that had certain character traits that would fit in with the manager's philosophy. And that's the hardest part. It's not easy. The football talent, you can see the data, you can measure, but spotting the character is always the hardest. That's always the challenge I have when I'm at clubs.
Of course, like scouting has kind of changed a lot, because you have a lot of like digital scouting portals that's doing the round, and previously it was just more or less, I think, word of mouth and what you see. So like,
yeah,
how difficult, because when you started out it was more of word of mouth, and now it's more digital, and how difficult or how easy was it for you to merge both the idea?
Yeah, it wasn't that hard, to be fair. It helped. So before, when I was younger, when you used to watch players, you watch purely on the talent and what you see with your eyes and what you feel with your intuition. But I think the data helps because it's another tool. I don't think you can just rely on it as a given. So you wouldn't say just because this player measures all this on the data that's going to guarantee you success, because nothing ever guarantees you success. All you're trying to do is you have the live games, which you go and watch, you have the data, you have all your information that you need, and then you put all that together, and then you have to make a decision. And if the decision is right for your club, if it ticks all the boxes and the things you're looking for, then all you're trying to do is just to make tip the balance in your favour, because you can't guarantee that no matter how much, if you pay 1 million, 10 million, 20 million pounds for a player, that you're going to be successful, because there's so many factors. But you're just trying to make it so I think the data now helps that decision process.
Of course, I'll ask you more, maybe a difficult question here, like which talent which you scouted was probably the best according to you?
The best?
Yeah.
Most successful? Probably Zaha.
Why?
Crystal Palace. Because I see him when he was very young, and I see him in these. I was coaching at the academy at the time, and he was playing in the local team for under 11. And after my game finished in the academy, I went to watch him play. So I think you can watch talent in their purest form. Like when they're very young, you can see the potential. So you can watch him, not only what he does with the football, but you can see that he can fight, he has good character, and he's a street player. So he's like, he played like a warrior. So for that, when he come into the club, he still had to develop. He still took a long time, but you could see something special about him from a very early age.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you, being a scout, like you maybe spot talents regularly, and whatever fits your criteria, you classify them. How do you maybe get the management or get the upper hierarchy to buy into that? Because maybe you may see a player who fits the bill, but probably the management does not want to invest in that. So how difficult is it, for you, or when back then?
Yeah, it's very difficult. I've lost more players than I've signed. That's a fact. You always do that. You're never going to sign everything you see, and I think you just have to learn to accept that even though it's very difficult, especially if that player goes on to become very successful. And then you think to yourself, oh, if he was come here, he could have done this. But I think when I worked with managers like at Tottenham at Pochettino and Eddie Howe, that was probably some real good success, because I understood what they wanted, really, what they really needed. And when you can understand their philosophy and what they need, they didn't sign every single one, but they probably signed a lot of players that come under that was recommended, that I recommended to them. So, and that was really fulfilling, because under that you have the trust. When you have the trust of the management and you have the trust of the people, then everyone would agree. It's when sometimes when your opinion is completely different, you're going to have some difficult challenges where sometimes the manager thinks that they can't develop this player, that he won't work into their team, and sometimes you just have to accept it. It's difficult, but you have to accept it.
And you're like in a different, if you turn the tables, when you are the person, like taking the call, when you're in Ostersunds or when you're with Huddersfield Town, how do you get around? Like, like, because everyone will be getting the best players they will probably have found. So how difficult is it to, like pick and choose between them?
Well, at that level?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not easy, because then you're in a different position. So I don't often get to see the talent as much as what I should, because I have to rely on my team to do that. And for my team to do that, then you have to train them to understand, to see what you see, which is always very, very difficult, because it's because everyone's at different stages of their career. So what you need them to do is understand the philosophy of the club, what the team needs, what the new manager needs, and then hopefully when they go out and they see the talent, or they see what they're looking for, it's pretty close. So then you have to have the trust you have to trust the people, trust in your team.
Of course, like I wanted to ask you, like you were with Southampton before they reached the Premier League, and Southampton had a very rapid rise, like from League One to maybe the Premier League, and they kind of had the similar core of players that they used all the way through. Like you have Lallana and many other people. So like when you all as a scout, as a team, did you expect the same core to stay all the way up, or was it only for that league that you were preparing for, and it turned out to be better than what you expected?
No, I think the ambition was always to get to the Premier League, but doing it in the way they wanted to do it, because they were very good at producing really good players. And they produced some really like Gareth Bale, Theo Walcott, Luke Shaw, Chamberlain. There's some real top talent. So, and they're starting to do that again now, which is really good for them. So I think that was always the ambition, was to try and get to the Premier League, but to do it in the way by bringing them sort of talents through. So they never spend big money on players, like real big money. So not the same as Arsenal or Chelsea or Tottenham, but what they do is they believe in their philosophy. So they will look to see what they have coming through their academy. If they don't feel this talent is ready, then they will maybe go and invest in another player, but still keep this talent coming through for another year. So it's a really good philosophy for young talent to develop. And that was the ambition of the club then, just to keep going and doing it the way they did. There was no rush. I mean, they wanted to get to the Premier League, of course, because they are a Premier League club, but they wanted to do it in their style.
And I wanted to ask you, since you're with Huddersfield Town of recently, and I remember them, like when David Wagner was there in the Premier League, like it was a very good sight to watch them, like probably everyone's second favorite team, because they were just neutral. No one hated them. Like you didn't have rivalry or something of that sort. What has happened to them? Like, like they have fallen like quite drastically from those days. What has happened?
What, Huddersfield?
Yeah.
What, Huddersfield?
Yeah.
I don't know. I can't speak. The second year of the Premier League, I wasn't with them, but I think in any new team that comes to the Premier League, the first season is always the surprise, because no one knows how they're going to play. They have a certain style, and teams have to get used to them. So the first year is always a good year for new teams if they manage to stay in the league. The second year is very, very tough. And I think with Huddersfield, they just lost their belief and they lost their way of what got them there in the first place. and they started to lose some games. And rather than keep going, they started to change too many things. The shape of the team, the players, different styles, and to be consistent in the Premier League, you have to have a consistent team. And I think all this didn't help, and then they lose more and more games, and they lose the confidence, and then it drops.
And like even now, like the second season you can understand, because in the Premier League probably it's more difficult. But now, like, they have not gotten back. Do you see them going back anytime soon?
I think it'll be difficult this season. You can never say never, because in the Championship it's very, very unpredictable. It's not like the Premier League where the top six are going to be the top six. In the Championship, anyone can beat anyone, so you can never say never. There's some very, very good, strong teams in the Championship this season, so I think it'll be very difficult for them. I think they will be fine. I think they will stay in the Championship. To challenge in the top six may be difficult, but you can never know.
Of course. And I'll ask you, like, of a recent topic, which was on very much in the news about the project Big Picture. What is your thought about that?
Sorry, say it again.
The project Big Picture, which was rejected.
Yes, yeah. I think it's understandable for it to be rejected in certain ways, because football in England, it needs the EFL to survive. So League One, League Two, Championship clubs. So they probably felt that they was probably more in favour of the bigger clubs for the long run, and not for them. So yeah, I think it's it's good to have the first thing not to be agreed, because I think for anything to work, all the clubs and all the leagues have to be comfortable. And there's lots of things at the moment to say that certain clubs have got more money than others, which is true. Certain clubs have bigger owners than others, even in the Championship and the EFL. So I think for it to be sustainable and fair for everyone, then they need to come up with another solution that maybe helps all the clubs the same way, rather than the big clubs certain ways.
And with the pandemic, there has been a financial problem for most of the teams, even in the Premier League, and also definitely lower down the pyramid. Do you think there will be help from the FA or the government for the footballers, or what is it like? What is the situation there?
Help with the pandemic situation, you mean?
Yeah, the financial part, because that's been
yeah. Well, it all depends, because obviously in England at the moment with coronavirus, it's very difficult, because it's certain parts of the country are having second waves. So, and the crowds were due to go back to the clubs, which would have helped them a lot financially, because that's a big part of their revenue. The biggest part of revenue for football clubs is player sales. The second part is the fans, when they come every week to watch their team play. So all the time that's not happening. It's putting increasing pressure on the teams. So I think when this can't go on for like a long time, because smaller clubs will not survive this. So I think that's why now they're trying to get a solution where they can try and help them, and that support would probably need to come from not just from the Premier League, the FA, the EFL. They all need to come together and find the right solution for this, because it's not just the Premier League's responsibility, it's not just their responsibility. If they want to save football in the UK, then they all have to be responsible.
I want to ask you, we all talk about football in England being, with huge numbers. You don't even consider, in terms of transfers, 20 million to be even something. You just say that, okay, is it 20 million? That's a change, for the Premier League teams. But lower down the table, how long will it be? How long is the game sustainable with no fans in the stadium?
Yeah, it's difficult, because the Premier League, well, obviously they can survive because of the TV money, and there are a lot bigger clubs, and some Championship clubs will be okay, and some Championship clubs will find it very hard. And beneath the Championship, League One, League Two, they will find it very, very difficult because they rely on the fans every week to bring them that regular income into the club, and without that, it's going to be difficult. So I think maybe I can't give a time because it's very difficult to give a time, but not too long, I would have thought.
And I'll get back to your personal self. And did you ever plan to get into coaching as such?
I started off as a coach.
No,
was the first part of my career was a coach, like management.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have thought about it eventually. Yeah, for the future, yeah, for sure. Because I've worked my way up all the levels now, all the way from the bottom. So this time, like once you've done some like areas of sport and director and technical director, then probably my next challenge will look to be coming to like football management over the next 3-4 years.
And which one, since you have held so many different capacities, in football, which one do you personally enjoy the most?
I think I always enjoy finding the talent, but I do really enjoy the role I do now. Like to have a overview of the club, so you can work closely with the manager, you can work closely with the players, the recruitment, and then for me, you can look to build something because it's your decisions. So it's your decisions on how the football club is run. So you play, for me, when you do this type of role, you're in scouting, you're just affecting the players, the recruitment. Here, you're affecting so many people, their lives, their jobs, and the shape of the club for the future. So you have a massive responsibility and pressure to do that. And that's something I really enjoy. So at the moment, I would say this type of position is I like.
And being in that position that you like, that is being the technical director or the head of footballing operations, or from the overview, whatever the job, what you're doing, what is the most difficult part of it, like that you have to do in a day-to-day basis?
Yeah, there's many difficult parts. Managing upwards with the ownership is a challenge, because especially when you're asking them to spend money, it's not always easy. I think that the most important thing with this situation is you have to be brave and stick to your philosophy, because and this is where you have to be strong in yourself and your beliefs and the philosophy of the club, because you're going to have challenges. You know that some days, some weeks are going to be difficult, especially if the team starts losing games, because then you will have pressure from the fans and from the ownership. But if you stick to your beliefs and your philosophy, I think that will show your strength, and hopefully over time, you can build something which is for the club, which is for the future.
Of course, and we are getting to the end, and I'll ask you last few questions. And if you could choose one standout moment from your career till now, what would that be?
That's a difficult one. I suppose I have a few, really. Zaha was really good to watch him develop to where he was. I think Bournemouth was really special for me, because at the time, when I took the senior role as head of recruitment, the team had just come up from League One into the Championship, and within 2 years we won the Championship and went to the Premier League, but we done it on a budget of 5 million over 2 years, which was quite small for the Championship. So I think that was an incredible achievement. Like that would be one of my other ones. And then at Tottenham was building a philosophy that we brought in so many successful young players. So players like Dele Alli, like Song, like Trippier, and again, Tottenham was a big club, massive club, but they couldn't compete with Chelsea, Arsenal, Man United, or teams like this. So you had to find clever ways of doing it different. So that was a really good moment as well.
Of course, and I'll ask you something related to your management, since you want to get into management and coaching. Do you have any coach or a manager whom you take inspiration from?
Yeah, I would say, because I've worked with him closely, would be Pochettino, to how he works, not just on the pitch, because he's a very, very special coach, but how he is as a human being. When you watch him every day and how he is with everybody, not just the players, just with all the staff, the cleaning staff, the cooking staff, I think that's why he's so good at what he is, because you can see that he has a talent for people, to getting the best out of them. And I would say him and then Eddie Howe are both. Eddie Howe was very, very good as well. So I say those two, because I've worked very, very close with them. I can take a lot.
Of course, and I'll talk of one player, that is Zaha. Since you scouted him from since you're small, he had a bad spell with United when he left Palace and went to United. So do you think
Yeah.
Crystal Palace is his limit, that where he's the star, and he would probably not be will be a fish out of water in a bigger place, or what is it what do you think of it?
No, I don't think that at all. I think that maybe Man United was a very big step for him, very young, a very big pressure, and also what happened to him was a bit difficult, because Alex Ferguson signed him, and then Alex Ferguson left the club, so a new manager come in. So sometimes when that happens, the manager that really wanted you, believed in you, he knew all about your talents, and then a new manager can come in and he might not feel the same way. So that cannot help. And then when you go to a club the size of Manchester United, it's one of the best clubs in the world. So you have a player like Zaha who is very young. You're under constant pressure, because for one, he might not have felt secure because the manager who wanted him is not there. Then also the expectations to play in with top players, because at the time they had big players there. And I think he's, at that time, if he was looking back now, he would probably agree that maybe his next step should have been maybe to a Southampton or a Tottenham or something like this, and then to Man United from there. His career at Crystal Palace, I think he's, on his day, he's one of the best. He could be one of the best players in the Premier League. So if he was to go to another club like an Arsenal or Tottenham or Chelsea, someone like this, I think now where he is, because he's matured and he's developed and he's refined his game, I think he would. I don't think Palace is his limit. I think if he was to go there, then he would perform really well there as well.
Do you see him leaving Palace to go to another Premier League club, because he's such an integral part of Palace? They'll be very, very reluctant to sell him.
Yeah, I think so, because he's probably one of their best players of all time. So, and he signed a long contract as well. So Crystal Palace don't have to sell him cheap. It's not like he's in the last year of his contract. So from the club's point of view, why would they want to sell him? From the player's point of view, he might want to go on to play for bigger things and win more trophies. So I think it's a difficult situation, because the player himself might have bigger ambitions, but the club are going to put a big price tag on him. And because of maybe the current climate with COVID and stuff, it's a lot of money now, because if they want 70-80 million, I don't think clubs will pay that now, especially with the way things are.
And since you are a technical director, how would you handle a situation like this, where a player might leave and probably is too big for Palace right now? Maybe, he's supposed to play in the Europa League year in, year out at the minimum. So how do you handle that situation?
Yeah. I think you have to. I think in this one you always have to compromise a little bit, and this is not always easy. So maybe you can say to the player, and this is just an example, maybe like myself and the manager and the owners will say to him, look, if you give us one more year, give us your best for one more year to help us stay in the Premier League, then we will let you go if a club offers this amount. And if the player is comfortable with that, because then he thinks to himself that he knows that his future can go on somewhere else, but he also knows that if he does his best, then he's still going to get that opportunity to play elsewhere. So I think you'd have to come to some sort of compromise which benefits the player and also benefits the club.
Of course, and I'll ask you two more questions, and the first of the two is, if you had to give a piece of advice to a young scout who is just starting out, what advice would you give that person?
I would say to learn as much as you can. I think for me, when I first started, I was always hungry to learn. And for example, I went to different countries to learn about different styles. And also I did different courses to help me educate. So for example, I did all my coaching badges, and then I did like a master's in psychology. And I think it's the learning, and also, the way you learn. You must think differently. So don't just think what is here now. Try and open your mind to different scenarios, and keep yourself learning and studying all the time.
Talking of the same thing, I want to ask you for your secret formula of scouting. But what is scouting according to you?
Scouting will always be talent, spotting potential talent, and that would be spotting talent in its purest form. So what are you seeing? What is the ingredients of the player you're seeing? Especially with younger players. I think when you're looking at younger players, you have to spot them in their purest form, because this is when you get to see the true reflection of themselves. When you're spotting top talent for like Tottenham, and you're looking to buy a player to come in and play now, then you have to look for more the complete character. So then it doesn't become potential anymore. It becomes, well, can they come in and adapt? So I think you have to split the two, like young players and then more senior players, and then you have to adapt the way you look at it.
Of course, and on that note, we'll wrap it up with one final question and I'll ask you, since you have been in the EFL for quite a while now, and if I play FIFA, so I had to buy few players, probably two players, and if you could suggest me some few good players who will probably have not burst into the scene, but will come in cheap, who would they be? Two players.
Two players, young players.
Yeah.
It's probably one plays for AZ Alkmaar called Badu. He's a striker. And there's, I would say, special talent. Someone like Todibo, maybe, who was at Barcelona, who's a young talent who was at Schalke. So I would say those two that are going to be probably big top talents in the next 1-2 years.
So I just want to have a segue to that. Do you play Football Manager?
No.
No, I have heard a lot of scouts and managers use that.
Not anymore.
Is it true, or is it just a fad?
I think you couldn't just rely on it. I think where they get their information from is very good. So for some people, it might be it might help, and some of the information might be fact, but no, you couldn't rely just on that.
Definitely, and on that.
Is that okay?
Yeah, definitely. On that note, David, thank you so much for talking to me, and I wish you all the best for your next endeavor, wherever it is, and hope you can earn more talent and win all possible trophies you can as a manager also. And hope we can talk in soon. Thank you once again for coming. Take care, stay safe. Bye.
Bye. Thanks.
Player-wise, it would have to be Steven Gerrard, just because, again, before he became a journalist, he was someone I just admired massively in terms of the absolute complete footballer. I think if you were trying to make a footballer in a factory, it would be Steven Gerrard, someone who, I think JB Carragher summed it up best once when he said, Steven Gerrard's biggest strength is he doesn't have any weaknesses.
The stadium. I don't see really need to do that, mainly such a big spending, but it's true that it would be a fantastic stadium. That's not bad, but you have to be careful, and mainly at this moment when we are going to face a very difficult time.